Okay, so last time we got our landing pads working, and our game is almost fully functional. There's just a couple of things that we need to do before we have a working game. First thing is, I noticed that on the last time we played, that when you restart a level, the fuel wasn't resetting properly. So watch what happens. I'm at 100 fuel, and I'm going to crash, and I'm at 87.2. And I'm going to restart, and the fuel should go back to 100, but it doesn't. It stays at 87. And that's because it's a global variable and it's not being reset on a scene reload. Globals can be shared between scenes. So we need to initialize that variable. So the way we might do that is with the player object, we will add an FSM here. So go to add FSM component, new FSM, and let's call this one starting variables. Right? And then over in the state, let's call this init. And then here in the action browser, what we're going to do is we're going to set that float value. So set float value and add that action to your init state. And the variable that we care about is fuel. So select that. And we want our starting variable to be 100. Now if we do this, when the scene reloads, it will set it to 100. But our UI won't demonstrate that because our UI on the fuel meter does have a startup, but it's not. It's going to start up at the same time as the other thing. So it'll be doing this bit at the same time as we're initializing that variable. So it won't get a chance to get the float change. So we need to send an event update UI after we've initialize that variable. So back here on player, let's do send event. So we're going to send that to that UI object. Okay, so just drag fuel meter into that box, and then remember we wanted the fuel meter UI script, and then we're going to send the update UI. Remember, because that's the name of this thing, right? And so what this is going to do is that when the game starts off, this script will start, it'll set the fuel value to 100, and then it'll send a message to this object that says, hey, update the UI, and it will clamp the fuel 0 to 500. It'll convert that float to a string, and it'll set the property. Okay. The other thing I think we should do is we should save our scene. So let's save scene as, and let's call this, like Moonlander. Probably should have done this many times over again. You should save and save constantly. I'm so used to doing it, I do it without even thinking. So go ahead and call your scene something that's going to mean something to you. I'd save it in the scenes folder and just save it right there, Moonlander. And then there's one last thing we want to do as well, and that is with our asteroids. And so the way the design for this game works is that if you touch an asteroid, you die. Landing pads you need to touch gracefully, otherwise you die. But asteroids, even touching them gracefully is an explosion. So we don't have to do a lot of work for this because we've already done a lot of the work for it. So if you go over to your landing pad object, we're going to take this script, so just left click here and then do copy component. And then we're going to come to our spheres that we have. And if you don't have them, just remake them. It's fine. Just pick one. And then we're going to paste component as new. Now this isn't a landing pad. We're going to call this asteroid. All right. So now we have this. We have the same script as landing pads, but we want to make a couple changes. Before we get into the script, though, let's make the radius of our sphere collider a little bigger. Let's actually make another one of these. So let's go to sphere collider, go to add component and add another sphere collider. So we'll keep this one for the actual mesh. This one will mark as a trigger, and we will make it slightly bigger. Let's try, let's see what happens when we do 1. Okay, that's too big. Let's try 0.6. Still looks a little too big to me. And 0.5 is perfectly normal, so let's try 0.55. Yeah, that looks pretty good. So you can see how there's a slightly bigger collider around that sphere now. And so now on the player listener, when this happens, it'll trigger the event on trigger enter. We don't care about the speed, so we can just delete that state. Just delete it. And we actually don't care about a good state either, so we can delete that too. And all we really need is this guy, the bad. So we'll flash up the loser UI and we'll send the player the death script. So just connect these two. That's really all we need for the asteroids. Let's rename this asteroid, by the way. And I'm going to delete these two. I want to keep this asteroid here. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to just Control-C, Control-V that a couple times. Okay, so let's give that a test. Just collide with one of those asteroids. Boom, game over. Press any key to replay. Excellent. Okay. I think we have a working game now. So next what we need to do is we need to add art to our game. We've been in a gray box mode, which is great, but now it's time to start adding some visual polish to our game, and we'll do that in the next tutorial.